Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can find the show online at buildingthefutureshow.com or follow me on Twitter at Building Show. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. Welcome back. We have George Borovec. He's the CEO and co-founder of Treasure Chest Marketplace. He's a serial entrepreneur, advisor, mentor, and early-stage capital investor. George, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it, and I'm humbled to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. We just connected in the last couple of weeks, and I kind of bumped you up in the queue because I was pretty pumped when we first talked, and I thought, man, I should get this guy on the show sooner than later. So thanks for kind of doing this. You know, I reached out to you last week saying, can we record you next week?
Yeah, totally. My pleasure, man.
So,
anything that I can do.
Yeah, so maybe we'll start off kind of a bit about your history and kind of where you grew up, and let's start there.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, for the most part, I was born in the former Czechoslovakia, and we escaped sort of in the early, I would say, 80s.
Oh, wow.
And moved to Canada, and for the most part lived in sort of the Toronto area, Oakville, more or less, until about 13 years of age. And then I think I moved to this little tiny town called Napanee, which is where I went to high school as well. And I think the high school is most famous for Avril Lavigne out of all people, but we'll do what we can to change it and get on the map.
Well, you're doing that.
I'm trying. We'll hopefully get there. We'll shake some things up and maybe see if we can disrupt some of the things that we have in mind. So, maybe we'll be known for that. Graduated probably about a year early. Was sort of like, okay, what do I do? All my friends are still in high school. You know, naturally you want to stick around with your friends. So I ended up moving to Europe. Was in Germany, the Czech Republic, and then I lived in Vienna for quite a while, and decided to go to university there with psychology, and decided, you know what, it isn't for me. And it's amazing how many entrepreneurs don't ever stick around too long once they get into sort of the curriculum and the system and figure out, you know what, this might not be for me, a little too rigid, and I've got bigger sort of aspirations. So spent a little time in Vienna, Austria, actually on 2 occasions. Another time I had gone back to Prague and Vienna for consulting work, and eventually decided to do something on my own.
Okay. So what made you kind of come back to Canada then?
Well, for the most part, to be honest, I got kind of homesick. More than anything else, it really bore down to that. And I had happened to meet a girl. So one of those. I had met a girl, and so the idea was sort of come back to Canada, get things sort of situated there, continue on consulting, and see how we could go back and forth between the U.S. And so she was in the U.S. and Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then, so when did you start Treasure Chest Marketplace?
So we started that we're in our almost 3rd year. So we were building it for about 2 years and then launched in January with Treasure Chest Marketplace. And I mean, essentially that grew out of, so with my she's now my ex, she was coming back and forth between Canada and the U.S. and she had stumbled upon a little classified site while we were trying to help my dad sort of fix his house, renovate it, and then sell it.
Right.
So we were typically going to this site. It's called Kijiji, and she really liked it. She thought it was pretty neat. And, I mean, it's a step above, let's say, Craigslist, which is what they predominantly have in the U.S. And she really enjoyed it and thought, you know what, I don't know why we don't have this in the U.S. And I said, well, you know what, we can do better than that. It was, 2013 essentially. And I said, we can do a lot better than this. And so I had moved back to the U.S. into this little place called Treasure Lake, which was this really cool gated community in DuBois, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And it was phenomenal. It had 2 lakes, PGA golf course. Like, it wasn't your typical sort of suburban area, and the name Treasure Lake, it just really stuck out. And I thought, okay, you know what, I'm going to create this thing for this community first.
Okay.
You know, sort of test the waters, validate, you know, if we definitely have something here. And then sort of started building it. And over time, it was like, you know what, let's do this for the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah. So Treasure Lake became Treasure Chest. And then it was like, okay, well, you know what, this is going pretty well. Let's do it for all the U.S. And then I sort of built out this, you know, this franchise model where it's like, okay, we can do a white label where anybody can own one of our, you know, treasure chest marketplaces.
Okay. So were you kind of franchising them out a little bit? Is that kind of how it
Well,
works?
that was the original idea, right? And sort of where we were heading. It was an interesting concept, and quickly we learned that you can't call it franchising because it really isn't.
Okay.
Yeah. And so slowly over time, I had shown it to a couple people back in Canada, some business individuals in the Kingston, Ontario sort of area, and they got sort of excited and were like, well, we think we can find you investors, and sure enough, they did. And sort of the investors lured me back to Canada, and under the assumption, you know, if you want the money, you have to come back here. So I did. I ended up moving back, and sort of we ended up changing the model a little bit, because it became a sort of, how does David compete against a Goliath like Kijiji, which
Sure.
is an eBay-owned company, or Craigslist, right? And Craigslist is huge in the U.S., but those are the two big predominant players in our game. And it's like, how do we ever compete against these guys? And slowly that model started to evolve as we were getting closer and closer to market, and it became the notion of, okay, well, who's hurting now? And we figured out that print and broadcast media were hurting the most. Newspapers, you know, we all know how they're sort of getting hammered.
Right.
TV, even sort of radio stations are feeling an impact.
Oh, for sure.
So we decided, okay, well, let's do partnerships with radio stations, TV stations, newspapers, and what we'll do is we'll do a co-branding for our platforms.
Okay.
And yeah, so we do sort of a model where it's, okay, based on your territory, its size, its population, we do a license agreement with that various newspaper, again, radio station, whatever it may be. We can work with charity groups, we can work with colleges, universities, student unions, all that stuff. And we give them a license agreement, and then we do a revenue share. So we do all the heavy lifting for them, and it introduces a new revenue stream, gets them caught up a little bit, and then it's also driving users to both of their, basically their portfolio. So as they sort of use our platform, they're also able to get that sort of analytics and data and be able to convert them to their existing portfolio, which is a really attractive thing. And essentially it works in the sense that they already, you know, are trusted in the community. They already have an audience.
That's actually really important and interesting, actually, is kind of your angle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's an important one because, again, we go back to that David and Goliath story. It's like, how do we ever compete?
Sure.
You know, and so when we go and we co-brand and partner with these groups, you know, they're already established. They're already in that community, and it gives us a leg up. Typically, they already have a marketing team, they have a sales team,
right?
You know, and they have the medium to give that exposure.
Sure,
so
and they kind of know what their audience is looking for too, right?
You got it.
Yeah, that's actually super important. I think that not a lot of people, I think about is you've basically figured out how to, you know, find your little niche and move into a huge potential market, right?
Oh, exactly. I mean, and you have to find the pain points, right? I mean, we are essentially catering to two different groups. You know, we're as much as we're B2B and doing these partnerships, we're also B2C. And you know, we need to make sure that the end user, someone like yourself who wants to sell an item, you know, that there's a good incentive to do that. And, you know, Treasure Chest Marketplace, as much as we look at it as a classifieds, I mean, we the idea is we built a social network built around classifieds, that makes selling your items is safer and easier. You have an avatar. We integrated Skype into it, so I can call you and see like that item actually exists. Or if you're providing a service, I can get to know you beforehand. And with group sell, it's extremely safe in the sense that, let's say, Kevin, you're selling your car for $10,000. You can allocate $100, $50, $1,000 to anybody in your social network who can help you sell it. And it's like you toggle your social networks, you blast it out to them. And if they help you sell it, you get to reward them.
Which is cool.
Yeah, well, it's that idea of everybody shares sort of in the wealth.
Sure.
And that's the whole idea behind even a social network, whether it's social wealth, whether it's, monetary or anything along those lines. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'm curious then, how do people kind of get started if they wanted to, sell an item? Maybe,
Sure.
Website and kind of how you kind of go about doing it?
Yeah, it's super, super easy. I mean, we made it as easy as humanly possible. So basically you would jump on the site, you can log in with your Facebook, your Google Plus, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, whatever you want, your email.
And what is the site, just for the listeners? And I'll post it online as well.
Sure, yeah, it's Treasure Chest Marketplace.
.com?
It'll, for the most part, geolocate you.
Right.
And the only one that we're launching now, actually, so far we're in just Canada.
Okay.
We have one in San Francisco.
Yeah, I noticed that.
That we sort of propped up there. We haven't done much with it. It's mostly for sort of investors and all that stuff to take a good look at it, and strategic partnerships that we're forming, sort of in San Francisco and the Bay Area.
Right.
But yeah, you can definitely take a peek at it there, or you can check out our Treasure Chest Marketplace corporate site, which gives a lot more detail and some videos in terms of what we do and who we partner with. But yeah, sorry.
No, that's awesome. So I'm curious, you obviously aren't in Silicon Valley and you're running a successful company, and you actually got told to move back to Canada. So I'm curious to know what it's like. Most people can't just up and leave and move to Silicon Valley for a number of reasons, family, friends. Sometimes they just don't even want to move, right?
Yep.
So I'm curious what it's kind of like, and, the pros and cons of running a startup outside of Silicon Valley.
Without a doubt, there are advantages and disadvantages. Canada, for the most part, is notorious for being risk adverse. I think things are getting better. Right. In terms of investment. But yeah, we're lagging significantly in terms of how that all works, and even sort of the ecosystem and the startup ecosystem and the idea of community, and it's a little bit behind. If you're building a B2C company, you really need to be in Silicon Valley. Sure. B2B, I think is a little bit easier here. And hardware might be a little bit easier here.
Sure. Why do you think hardware is easier, just out of curiosity?
I think, well, in particular, especially in Ottawa, Ottawa is sort of a telecommunications hub.
Right.
Nortel was here. It's sort of the same with Kitchener-Waterloo. RIM was there. So they've got that hardware experience. A lot of the engineers, are hardware.
Right, of course,
so
right.
There's a good understanding of hardware here in these two cities, for sure. But yeah, you know what? Where Canada is far superior, it's definitely in sort of your R&D, your talent. Like we have huge talent here, and the beauty of it is it's a fraction of the cost of what it would cost you in San Francisco.
Sure, even with the Canadian dollar value, we're joking lately, it's like a 25% discount right now.
It is absolutely insane, and so for anybody listening, the one thing I definitely recommend is we also have a ton of subsidy programs. Whether it's IRAP or OCE or any of these government subsidy programs, and they're non-dilutive.
Sure.
So the beauty is, we were talking to, we had gone to 5 meetings on a trip back in February, in terms of investors. And one of the most attractive things to them was to be able to say, hey guys, you know what, we're looking for $1 million because we're in Canada, and as long as we keep the R&D and some of our team here in Canada, we can take your $1 million investment and we can turn that into almost 2.2 million.
Sure.
Right?
Well, and Shred too, right?
You've got Shred, you've got IRAP, exactly.
And I think there's one where if you are an American company investing in a Canadian startup, there's another government program. Is that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
There are so many.
Oh, okay.
Right? I wish I knew offhand, but yeah, you're right. There are those, and then not just that, but look at the conversion.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The current dollar value is massive. So this is a huge incentive when you know, if again any of the listeners are out in sort of Silicon Valley, or you know, these are things that you can leverage here on the Canadian side.
Because I even have a few buddies that work, actually, like a guy that I used to work with, he's still in Edmonton, and then I have a friend in Vernon in British Columbia, and they both work for, one works for a startup in actually right downtown San Francisco, and the other one works for a startup in Portland. And you know, they both commute a couple of times a year, you know, for weeks at a time, but it's awesome for both parties.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of friends that do it from Vancouver.
Right.
I've had there's quite a few friends that are, you know, based sort of in Ottawa, but are going back and forth between San Fran and working for, you know, the likes of Twitter. I just had a friend go there. He had done an interview with Get Around.
Right.
Another friend, I just sort of hooked up with somebody at Google and Apple and Udemy and Get Around as well. And it's like we're slowly migrating back and forth, you know, and it makes sense. It's the flight to Silicon Valley or San Fran, you know, it's typically, I think, under $700.
Yeah.
You know, once you start to grow your network, you end up meeting so many people, and you know what, we're founders, we're startup founders, and it's dirty, and can I crash on your couch?
No, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? I think people glorify it a little bit, right? Sometimes it's not.
Yeah, well, it's not, you know, and like we're all bootstrapping, you know, we're all poor. It's not, and we have to go through that. I think that's part of the sort of what can we call it? It's like a christening.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not meant to be pretty. If it was pretty, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think part of it is you need to struggle a little bit and understand, you know, what you have, right, when you make it.
Yep. Yeah, you got to have your little failures.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. Again, you know, we hear all the unicorns and the success stories, but dig deeper and you're going to hear, like, how much they struggled. You know, the WhatsApp guy, you know, he was collecting food stamps. And
really, I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh, it's a ridiculous story. Like he was collecting food stamps, and actually his $19 billion, when they got acquired for $19 billion, he signed that deal in the food stamp office where he was collecting food stamps.
Oh wow, that's insane to me.
It's one of those stories, right? And we all go through it.
Sure.
It sort of weeds out the strong from the weak, and the wantrepreneurs from the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, fair enough. So I'm curious then, how often do you find yourself needing to go to Silicon Valley or San Francisco?
Yeah, you know what? My full intention is hopefully in the next 6 months to be there full time.
Okay.
I fell in love with it.
Oh, it's a beautiful city. I love it too.
It's the city, and like I in particular, I love Palo Alto and Mountain View.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
I fell in love with the people, you know, too. The mentality, the startups, the founders. It's one of those places where it's just like every time we've ever gone there, we've either done something incredibly remarkable, like we met the Uber founder, Michael Harrington.
Okay. How was he? He seems like the super nice guy.
You know what? And this is it. Like every single one of them. So the two things that always stood out every time I go and I meet somebody or a founder, or it's literally anybody. The first question that they always ask is how can I help you? Like, what do you need? Right? And they do it. Like it's absolutely mind-boggling. I talked to one guy who was kind enough to give me his time to get a Skype call. Within 30 seconds of the Skype call, after he had asked me, what can I do for you? And I threw out a couple things, sort of any introductions to people sort of in my space. Within 30 seconds, he had shot out 3 emails. And one of those emails ended with, as he's doing an intro, he's saying, I would take it as a personal sort of gratitude and favor if you could talk to George. I just met this guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And the way that he positioned that, and that is something else that is a drastic difference between, the Valley and here in Canada. You definitely, we got to get better at that, building our community, building the ecosystem, doing stuff for each other and not expecting anything back.
No, totally. It's interesting because there's been people that I've wanted to reach out to on the show for probably a decade, and I never had a reason to. Like, what am I going to say, right? But now that I have the show, I email them and say, I'd love to have you as a guest. And I would say 90% of the time, I heard back from them or their assistant. And I always have pre-calls like I did with you. And one of them, well, even a couple of them, they're trying to like sell me on why they should be on the show. And I'm kind of like, you're on. Like, I'm happy. I'm happy you responded to my email. Never mind, we're chatting right now. So, these guys they've made more money than they know what to do with, and they're still trying to say like, will you have me on your show? It's like, you're on the show.
You know
so
what?
I love that.
And that's our responsibility. That's part of the gig, right?
Sure.
As a founder, it is our responsibility. If we're going to grow this ecosystem, and I mean, it's growing huge, right? Globally. Everybody, I love it. Like I go to a cafe these days and I see, somebody talking about their startup or somebody pitching a VC or an angel, even here in Canada. And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. My roommate is starting 2 startups. He took a year off from the government. Now he's starting 2 startups.
Really?
Awesome. Oh yeah. And I see it more and more, and people are just jumping into this. And you know what? I've been lucky enough to have people before me, educate me on what I need to know and what they garnered from their experience, their lessons. And now it's up to me, and that should keep going like that. And we so badly need to put emphasis on that. So I can understand. I can totally understand why they, want to be involved in the show, because it's our way of giving back.
Well, yeah, and I think too, it's weird, a little bit weird for me now. Like, I'm 32, and so I've been in the industry quite a while. Like, I started when I was about 12 doing this stuff, and then I was running my own little web shop late in my teens, and then I kind of been working in the industry for, since I was 18, getting paid, right?
Awesome.
And the thing is you have younger guys reach out to me. Like, I talked to guys that were 20, 23 the other day. They wanted me on their little podcast, and they were like honored to have me. And it's weird because I always reached out to people, growing up and saying, can you help me or with this and that? And, majority of them, did give me the time of day and help me out. And you're right. I feel like I need to do the same thing to people that are up and coming and whatnot. Yep. And I love giving back. And in some ways I'm honored that they even ask.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's almost like the sorority, right?
Exactly.
It's a roller coaster ride, and then to be able to talk with others and who have sacrificed everything and gone through this, this lifestyle, and it's kind of fun to trade those war stories, right?
Exactly. So I'm curious, you're also a mentor and an advisor. What do you kind of look for in an entrepreneur when you're mentoring or, advising people?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, I think the most critical thing is entrepreneurs or founders who can listen, who are willing to listen. It was the same thing with me. It took me a little while, actually. I was pretty stubborn, thinking I knew everything. But then it sort of clicked after, a few months. I understood, like, you know what, I need to listen to these people. So finding someone who can just sit there and absorb what you're trying to say,
right,
is critical. It doesn't necessarily matter what they're doing, but if they're receptive to the idea of listening and just sponges, right? I think that's so critical because, you know, when I do mentoring and advising, I don't even like that word, because it's not up to me to tell somebody what to do.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, well, typically, I mean, I may not be in that space.
Right.
And so I don't have the full understanding of that. But here's what I can share with you. I can share with you my experience. You know, what we did at that stage in our growth, what we did at that point. Did we do that deal? Did we nix that deal? Was it worth it to us? You know, and talk about, you're here, I was once there, this is how we got through it or didn't get through it, or this is what we had to do to get through it. And those sponges will take that in.
Right.
You know?
Well, because their friends and family just kind of don't understand what they're really going through. Like, they're supportive, but it's hard to give advice on something that, especially if they're not technical, they don't really understand what you're even talking about sometimes, I find. Do you find that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know what? I remember early on, you know, I was sort of involved with a couple incubators, accelerators, and all that stuff. And I mean, some of the time it was like getting advice from a guy who sold was a shoe salesman and sold a shoe business back in the 80s, giving me advice on a high-tech company. And it's like, everybody's sort of got an opinion. It's very easy to have an opinion.
Sure.
It's very easy to come in and start tearing stuff up and saying, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you should be doing this. Well, you know what? It's not a cookie cutter. And you can't go in, and I can't have a shoe salesman telling me what I should be doing with a high-tech company.
Yeah, that's valid.
And that goes for me too. You know, I'm not a shoe salesman, but my industry, that I understood and know extremely well was the classifieds, the e-commerce side, S-commerce, all that stuff. That's where the B2C stuff, and some of that is relevant, but talking and experience is so much more crucial. And yeah, you're going to get advice from everywhere on what to do. It's one of those things. I always tell people, institute the week-long rule. Before you make any decisions, take a week.
Really? That's actually really good advice.
Well, it's something I learned, and that was from somebody, where I was in an incubator accelerator. They were probably a year ahead of us, and I mean, they almost lost the company signing a deal.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. And ever since then, they instituted this week-long rule where it's like, we are not going to sign anything. We are not going to make any decisions until we've given it a week to talk through, and to dwell on it. And you can't do that for every single case.
Right.
But 99% of them you can. And that's one of those things, that's a tidbit of advice that could save your company.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Do you have any other advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, kind of either what to do or not to do?
You know what? I'm a huge sort of proponent for solo co-founders. I'm not crazy.
Really? Interesting. Actually, yeah. I'm curious to know why you say that.
Because it's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult when you're starting out a startup, and you know what? You will. I keep saying this. It's like, I used to be a good-looking guy, but this startup life and all these hats and all the time it takes for a single co-founder when you're first starting out, you are building every single aspect of that company on your own, and you're doing the marketing, you're doing the strategic partnerships, you're doing the, social media side, sales, your HR, your everything.
Right.
And to be honest, I don't see an advantage to that. And again, there are disadvantages and advantages. Co-founders can fight, but it's my belief that there is your equal out there and someone who can offset your weaknesses. I have plenty of weaknesses, and for me to have been able to find a co-founder from day one who shared that passion, that would have saved probably almost a year of building and all that stuff. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult as a first-time founder, let's say.
Right.
Maybe on your second go-around, especially if you exited and all that stuff. That's fine. That's a whole other ball game. But in the early days, two heads are better than one, for sure. In my opinion, right?
Sure. I think it's also tricky to, like, if you have an idea and you're passionate about it and you're convinced that it's going to go, and you can't find somebody, I feel like you should just go for it anyway. Like, why would you hold off trying to find somebody? Because you could spend eternity and never find somebody. So I never really understood where a lot of guys are telling people, oh, it's like, unless you have, don't start something unless you have a co-founder. It's like, well, that doesn't.
Sure. Yeah. You can definitely start. You know, there's all the foundation building, all that stuff. You can, like, you can bring in somebody essentially at any point. It gets tougher and tougher. Like, even if you're bringing in a COO, you know, underneath the CEO or the founder or whatever the case may be, but to have somebody there from day one who shares the passion and shares sort of the vision with you,
right?
It's much easier. I'm not I just know myself that I would never do it again. As a first-time founder, I would never do it again solo.
Okay.
I would have found a co-founder from day one, but that's not to say that people can't do it. There's enough people, you know, who again, are more than capable of going it on their own. But yeah, for me, that's the one thing is, and it's also something I look at, you know, when you ask me, what do I look for in entrepreneurs?
Right.
It's definitely the team and who else is there. You know.
Sure. So you want to meet everybody on the team?
I'd like to. Sure.
Okay. So do you find you just mentor people within Ottawa, or do you kind of spread out a little bit more?
You know what? It's sort of all over the place.
Okay.
You know, I've sort of, how can we say it? You know, I got a call probably 3 days ago from a gentleman in Atlanta, actually, Atlanta and North Carolina.
Okay.
He goes back and forth. You know, and it was sort of out of the blue, and the notion of picking my brain and stuff. And, you know, he's got this really interesting social networking platform for the military, the U.S. military, and some of those that suffer from PTSD. So, you know, he found me, I don't know if it was LinkedIn or my About Me page, and sort of reached out. I thought what he was doing was extremely commendable, and I commended him on it, and he asked if he could chat. I said, sure, yeah, of course.
What's the site, just out of curiosity, if people want to check it out?
I don't think he's up and running yet. He's launching soon, but it's called Dojo.
Okay.
And it's going to be, it's really, really cool. And I mean, it couldn't be more timely right now than with what's going on, sort of, you know, all the veterans in the U.S. and what they're suffering through, and here in Canada too.
Yeah, exactly.
So my hope is they'll launch it here as well, and pretty neat idea. Good social.
That is a really good idea. So is there any other advice that you'd have for any other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably
go on all day.
We could go on all day. Yeah, just minor things. Don't be afraid of strategic partnerships. I'm another thing I'm a huge proponent of. It's okay to do strategic partnerships, you know, especially with companies that are going to be able to boost your, you know, your offering and what you're doing. And if you can work it out in a way where it's mutually beneficial, you know, who knows? You could partner with a huge company. Essentially, they're pushing it out there for you.
Right.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, any tips on how to get a strategic partnership?
Reach out to them.
Just reach out to them, email, LinkedIn.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny because people tend to be afraid and or even asking for help, right? Like these companies are open to the idea of collaboration, you know, and they're grateful for the idea that you may be able to offer them something that they need that could be a missing component that could bring them to the next level. And for the most part, it literally is a matter of just reaching out. Like, don't make it a pride thing or an ego thing that they may shoot you down. Who cares?
Yeah, I think people forget about that. Is pretty much everything that I've ever got in my career, especially outside of, you know, Edmonton and Canada even, is I just asked. Like, I just literally sent somebody a tweet or a quick email or a message on LinkedIn saying, hey, are you looking for anybody else? And, there's times that you never hear back. And that's, sometimes that even 70, 80, let's say even 90% of the time. But all you need is one person to say, sure, let's chat. That's how I got the radio show. I write for a tech blog out of Los Angeles. That's how I got that. Just literally Twitter. And then LinkedIn was the reason I got the radio show. So, and I just asked for both of those. And I don't know why people are so scared.
You know what? It blows my mind. And it's
like nobody knows if you send 10 emails and nobody writes back to you. You don't have to tell anybody until somebody writes back to you, right? Put away your ego, put away your pride. You know what? Just go out and get it done. Like, go out and just do it. Like, kill it. It's okay. Like, nobody's laughing at you. Well, know? And especially in our ecosystem, we're all like, how'd you do that? Exactly. People are more interested in kind of how you struggle to figure it out. And I think the other thing that I've learned recently in the last couple of years is everybody seems to read business books and, they try to follow somebody else's way to get to the top. And you know what? Take what you can from those. Sure, they're great. Like, I'm not trying to bash them. But the best advice I've ever heard is, like, you're on your own path. Like, you can't follow somebody else's path. You need to figure out, like, what you want, and you need to figure out how to get there. And it's like, my path will be different than your path, and everybody else's here.
You got it. You nailed it. Like, I can't tell you, and I'm sure you've heard this too, Kevin, like how many times people are like, well, Anderson Horowitz says we need to have this and this before we can do this. And Facebook didn't do it that way, or I'm like, what?
Yeah, who?
I'm like who? Like, stop talking about that. Just do your thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such nonsense. Like, you know what? And I learned this from a very good friend of mine who's a former angel, head of the Angel Network here in Ottawa, who is phenomenal in telling me this. And we walk around so often talking about, hyping up our companies more or less. It is part of the culture.
Oh, for sure.
To try to hype something up and there's that. The buzzword, killing it, we're killing it. And it's like, we were killing it before we even launched, and we really weren't killing it. And what impressed me and what he had to say was, he's invested in some of these companies who you never hear about. Right. You never hear them hyping. You never hear anything. But you know what? When you find them and you start to learn about them, they're killing it. And they don't need to announce that they're killing it. They're killing it.
I also think that if you hype so much and you get so much publicity, and you probably grow like crazy and you're probably doing really well, but when you're at the top, you can only go down. And if you kind of never really hit this like pinnacle of, hype or whatever, I don't even know what the term, or even if it is, there is a term for it. But if you hit that, you can only go down, right? And people, and I don't know if I'd ever want to be the most popular at anything, right? I'd rather be kind of just a little bit, almost like above the radar, popular enough, but where people, where you're still relevant a decade later. There's these things that get hyped and hyped and hyped, and then 6 months later, they're nobody's talking about them, and you can't even find them on the app stores anymore. So
you got it. And again, I mean, it's like, you know what, like, and again, it was one of these lessons that I learned. It's like these days, like, I've got another project I'm working on. It's like, it's completely under the radar. I'm not saying anything, and I actually love that notion.
Sure.
Because it's quiet, and it's like, when it's ready, it'll get out there, and when it's out there, it'll do its thing. And you know what? You don't have to hype it. That'll come on its own.
Right. Yeah, when other people hype it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, what better? Well, that's your word of mouth. That's getting to your critical mass. And when critical mass is just talking about it and saying, "Wow, this is amazing." You don't have to do anything.
So I'm assuming you don't want to elaborate any more on that, but do you have a time frame of when that's coming out?
Let's say.
Or not really.
We'll say soon.
Soon-ish.
This one, soonish. Super excited about it. We think it's going to disrupt just about everything, and it's for every founder and every startup, and it's finally going to unite the whole ecosystem, and we're super, super excited about it.
Interesting.
We'll love to, when we get closer, I'll make sure I'll spill the beans to you first.
Sure.
Who knows? Maybe we'll do another show, because I think this one's going to help everybody. So.
I was just going to say we should probably do another show when you're ready to launch or about to launch or just after you launch. You let me know and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I would love to. I think when I sort of spill the beans on it with you, and I think you're going to be pretty pumped about it. So
I'm already excited, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
it's an interesting space. Just I get that you basically didn't really tell me that much, but I maybe have an idea of what you're gonna do, and if you're doing that, I'm very excited about that.
It's gonna change the game, right? So and it's really exciting. And I don't know, it's long overdue and it's time, and yeah, super, super excited about it.
Well, George, this has been awesome, and we're running out of time on the show, but I kind of want to just close with you kind of mentioning where people can find you online.
For sure. Yeah, without a doubt, feel free to reach out to me anytime. You can find me on LinkedIn, George Borovec. Just type it in. I'm on Clarity. I don't know if you go and spend any time on Clarity, Kevin, but you should definitely, even yourself, try to get on there.
I have an account, but I don't use it ever. But I should.
Yeah. You know what? If anybody that's looking for mentorship, advice, as much as I don't like to call it advice, or even strategic planning, anything along those lines, Clarity FM, you can reach out to me there. It's clarity.fm/George Borovec. And about me, another great page to sort of get some info, and more than happy to chat with anybody. And this has been great. I really, really appreciate it.
I really, really appreciate having you on the show. And like I said, I'm happy that you agreed to do this so quick. I really wanted to fit you in, and I bumped a couple people out of the slot so I could get you on, because I knew when we talked a couple of weeks ago that you'd make an awesome show, and this was awesome, and you shared a lot of really good advice, and I'm excited to have you back on the show when you're ready to announce your latest venture. For sure, and yeah, I really appreciate it. I mean, I think we're founders, and guests are only good as the host, and you're one of the best, man. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. I guess we'll talk soon. Awesome. Have a good one. Kevin. Okay, you too. Yeah, bye. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. You can visit past shows at buildingthefutureshow.com. If you're going to the Startup Expo on February 16th and 17th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and want to record an episode, please contact me. The music for the show is by Electric Mantra. Check them out at electricmantra.com. Until next time, keep building the future.